Mark Fisher, represent Calvert County in District 27C, and I'm here on behalf of HJ2, House Joint Resolution 2. The bill is titled United States Constitution Amendments Convention Limitations on Federal Power. This joint resolution states that the General Assembly applies to the United States Congress for an amendments convention to be called pursuant to Article 5 of the United States Constitution, as soon as 2/3 of the states have applied for a convention, to propose amendments to the US Constitution that impose, number one, fiscal restraints on the federal government. Number two, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And number three, term limits for officials of the federal government and for the members of the United States Congress. Delegates to the convention from Maryland may not propose amendments that do not address the goals listed in those three items. The application constitutes a continuing application until at least 2/3 of the legislatures of the states have made application for an equivalently limited amendments convention. Madam Chairwoman, I know that we do have a lot of wonderful people that will be testifying today. And I just want to say this. There are 19 states that have passed this exact resolution. 19. There are 34 legislatures that have passed this resolution in either one of the bodies or both. Pretty amazing. And in the past 7 weeks, we filed COS resolutions in 18 states. We have a great group testifying. They come from places like China, Iran, Romania, and Israel. All ages, all backgrounds. One individual, a young man by the name of Jacob, is the state STEM winner. Pretty extraordinary.
Delegate Fisher, you've used your 2 minutes.
Quite frankly, Madam Chair.
Can you summarize just what you want to say?
I'd be happy to. Honestly, I thought that members of the House of Delegates had more than 2 minutes, but I guess in your committee, that's not the case.
We're pressed for time.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate and incredibly wrong, just to let you know. Notwithstanding that, I would be happy to turn it over to my panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Patrick, would you start calling the witnesses? I think.
Sure. The first one I have here is Michael Riley.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, my name is Michael Riley. I live in Durwood, Maryland, in District 19. I'm a PhD scientist who develops advanced computing technologies for climate science. I also volunteer with Convention of States Action as Maryland's state director, representing more than 30,000 supporters across the state. We're a nonprofit constitutional education organization dedicated to helping Marylanders improve our civic skills and build bridges between constituents and their legislators. We are a diverse group that cares deeply about Maryland and the United States. Our supporters are here to tell you why they believe an Article 5 Convention of States is necessary at this time. Like you, Madam Chair, they are motivated by the problems our fellow citizens face, and they strive for constructive discussions about the way forward. Today, I will focus on the resources we could apply to those problems. Maryland's share of federal spending is over $113 billion, which is about $20 billion more than our annual state budget. With how much control do you have over where that $113 billion goes? Is it solving important problems we face in Maryland? Are we getting the value we deserve? Maryland is home to some of the most highly regarded institutions in the world. We have one of the most educated populations. We Marylanders know best how to apply our citizens' hard-earned resources to our own local issues. But to have that discussion, we need to rebalance our relationship with our federal government. An Article 5 Convention of States provides a well-understood, disciplined way for you and your fellow state legislators from across the country to start that discussion. Let's bring those resources back to Maryland so you, our legislators, can work together to make sure those hard-earned resources go where they're needed. Only then can we get fair, equitable, and sustainable solutions that truly meet Maryland's needs. Please pass the resolution out of committee for debate and a vote on the floor. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. The next witness is Nancy Dahl.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you put your camera on so people can see you?
I don't know how to do it. It was when we were rehearsing, it was doing it, but what can I hit to get it active?
I can't help you with that. I'm sorry. We'll do the best we can. Please continue with your testimony.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, I need to
You have
get
2
this
minutes.
out.
Go ahead.
Members of the committee, our constitutional republic is in jeopardy. We are letting our federal government take away our freedoms. Censorship, for one, and under the guise of for the better good, is how totalitarianism begins. Our federal government and media together unlawfully are smothering any opposing views, thwarting any debate. China, Eastern Europe, Cuba, and now Brazil. History has given us warning signals, and this one is blaring at us. Our system of controls are being eaten away, disregarded. If we continue on this path, I believe that ultimately the role of the states will be so diminished as to become obsolete. It would be naive to think that this country could preserve our freedoms and inalienable rights if we do not take action. You, right now, have the opportunity to use our Constitution to protect our Constitution. Holding a convention of states is a constitutional right, not some concocted notion. Any fear or hesitation should be outweighed by the degree of what we have to lose. The clock is ticking. Please vote in favor of this resolution and let it pass to the floor for debate. Debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next witness is Cody Tristan White.
My name is Cody White. I am 11 years old and a homeschooled 7th grader from Mechanicsville, Maryland. Power tends to co-opt, and absolute power co-opts absolutely. This phrase came from Lord Acton when he sent a letter to Bishop Creighton in 1887, and the sentiment holds true today. History has shown us that when people stay in power for too long, they become co-opted by it. They forget where they came from and the people who elected them. Currently, there are members of Congress who have held their jobs for more than 40 years. Honestly, what regular job could they have had? What could they know about the middle class, the poor? They've not had to work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. They don't have to worry about the price of eggs or how they're going to feed their families. Many members of Congress have been in the government for so long that they are totally disconnected from most of America. How are they representing their constituents if they don't understand them? How can we say we are a representative government if our elected officials don't actually represent the people they serve? When the Prime Minister of New Zealand stepped down a few weeks ago, she said, "I am leaving because with such a privileged role comes responsibility, the responsibility to know when you are the right person to lead and also when you are not." I wish more people in Congress were like her. Term limits are necessary for prosperity. President Eisenhower said, "What is good for the president might very well be good for the Congress," and Americans agreed with him. I believe that representatives will better represent when we limit how long they can represent us. The founders wanted a truly representative government, so they made it possible for the people to call a convention of states through their states. This is our chance to make this happen. Please support HJ2. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Mary Jane Parole.
I'm Mary Jane Perot, Regional Captain of Maryland Convention of States, and represent almost 5,000 Convention of States supporters, and thankful for your attention today. Our Article 5 Convention of States resolution is simply calling for a national convention to debate the 3 topics outlined in the application. Citizens across the state are concerned about what's happening in Washington and are relieved when they learn there's a solution. They immediately sign the petition, knowing that term limits and fiscal restraints are needed. A recent survey showed that 80% of voters across party lines wanted Congress term limited. Those opposed have said elections are term limits, yet the president can only serve 2 terms. Congress should be term limited as well, but it can only be accomplished through a convention of states. Inflation, created by federal overspending, lowers our standard of living, and low-income families suffer the most. Wouldn't it be helpful to have one topic in one bill as we do in Maryland? This helps control costs. So we're just asking to have a meeting to discuss these types of solutions. I'm sure you've heard from your constituents in your district who took the time to let you know they're tired of DC regulating us, taxing our hard-earned money, and telling us what we can and cannot buy. What you might not know is that over 30,000 Maryland residents support this, and numbers keep growing. It's exciting to realize that our founders gave us the most powerful, peaceful, legal, and constitutional method to end some of this political madness in DC. As a republic, we need to rebalance the power between the states and federal government as outlined in the Constitution under Article 5. Please support HJ2. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Elwood Redfern.
Madam Chair, I have not seen him in Zoom.
Okay. Next name witness I have is Chegbo Sun.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. You have 2
Ladies,
minutes.
thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to speak in front of you. My name is Chengbao Sang. I'm from China. When I first came to the United States, I was like a bird out of the cage. This land is like an image of heaven to me. But because of where I came from, I recognize that communism is coming here. 3 years ago, the almost forgotten feeling of suffocating suddenly struck me hard when we were instructed what we could say and how we shall think. I was told freedom of speech was protected here, but now so much censorship, so many decisions are made by Washington, D.C. instead of our state. I am hyper alert of freedoms suddenly disappearing. My friends who grew up in the United States have not realized it is a big deal. They ask, what does it have to do with me? I have many examples of things happening right here that frighten me and perhaps should frighten you as well. Sharing information freely used to be the greatest freedom. Now many things are fact-checked. A fact-check department? That sounds like a Soviet Union Ministry of Truth. Then whose truth is that truth? Who is in charge? I love this country. When I look around at the world, I see that our country is the last land of peace and freedom. She is worthy to fight for. She is a light to the people who have lost their freedoms. This will go away if our government is not reined in. If you pass this resolution, you will have a hand in taking back the power the federal government has taken away from Maryland. A convention to talk about this
Thank you.
will do so much good.
Thank you. Your time is up, but I appreciate your conversation and your.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
We will go back to Elwood Redfern.
My name is Cantor Elwin Redfern from Silver Spring, and I've lived in Maryland for 32 years, and I am a second-generation American. I am a professional cantor and have been a prayer leader in traditional Jewish synagogues in Annapolis, Baltimore, and Delaware. I'm here today as part of the Convention of States to ask you respectfully and humbly to approve HJ2. We just want the resolution discussed and debated for the first time in the House of Delegates during this year's legislative session. I have supported the Convention of States because for at least 10 years now, I feel there is too much federal authority in every person's daily life in America. As an election judge in Montgomery County for 20 years, I have been very interested in our county government and in legislative matters in Annapolis. President Abraham Lincoln said, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." I'm not sure that our federal government wants us anymore. The federal government is taking away your power as a state government, and this is alarming to me. There are now 19 states that have already approved the Convention of States. 32 state committees have passed the COS resolution, including the state of Massachusetts. 4 more states are close to passing this week. If Maryland legislature passes the Convention of States resolution and becomes a supporter, Maryland will have more freedom and liberty to run her state as President Lincoln asked, because it will be participating in helping make the choices now made at the federal level related to budgeting, the scope of the federal government, and how long legislators serve the states. All through this convention, Maryland should have a loud voice as a leader in this convention. I want to close with a prayer for all of you in this committee today. We want to thank our Lord for giving this committee the gracious gift of knowledge. Thank you for letting me speak to you. I wish you all shalom, peace, good health, and success in your duties here in the State House.
Thank you very much. The next witness is David Hafer. Mr. Hafer.
I don't see him in the Zoom, Madam Chair.
All right, we'll go on to Jacob DeBurr. Or
Hi, can you hear me?
yes, go ahead, Jacob.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm in 7th grade and I live in California, Maryland. Most people know what term limits are, but not many people know the true value of them and how they are formed and implemented. Term limits were first introduced to the government on February 27th, 1951 via the 22nd Amendment. This prevented people after Franklin Roosevelt from serving more than 2 terms in a row as president. Term limits are crucial to governmental structure as it prevents presidents from making bribed or biased decisions to retain power, an oppressive and almost dictatorial government from forming, and a leader from becoming corrupt and power hungry. This nuance of human nature is not just limited to our commander-in-chief. In the present, most elected officials are allowed to serve an unlimited number of terms, which leaves them susceptible to the same greed and may be the reason that we've surpassed our debt ceiling. For instance, public officials could be coerced through bribes or risk of election into supporting laws that a vocal and connected group of people demand, even if, in their opinion, these laws aren't the best for the country as a whole. When elected officials are more heavily influenced by wealthy donors and connected individuals than their own constituents, then they represent the special interests rather than the people who are working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Additionally, older politicians taking up the limited seats of government prevent new and innovative ideas from forming. This leads us to the point where officials push the status quo for special interest groups, mocking the design of our representative government. Term limits minimize the amount politicians would be susceptible to lobbyists and their financial influence, and it would establish safety buffers to protect against negative consequences for the country. They would also allow for new people to be involved and overall improve our society for our citizens. Thankfully, the Founding Fathers designed the Constitution to allow for checks and balances. Article 5 is one of these. By calling a convention of states, we can place term limits on those who need it most, the congressional body who are biased to special interests rather than representing those who elected them. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next is Cesar Vodopia. Hello.
He's in the Zoom, Madam Chair. I think he just unmuted.
Hello.
Oh, very good. Yes, go ahead, please.
All righty. My name's Cesare Vodopia and I live in District 13. Our country will turn 247 years old this year. That's just a little over 4 of my lifetimes. This is still a young country. It is an experiment in self-governance. Because of the growing size and depth of the federal government, I fear we may be in the late stages of an unsuccessful experiment rather than the early stages of a successful one. As a civil libertarian, the unconstitutional overreach of the federal government scares me. As a fiscal conservative, the reckless spending scares me. Finally, it scares me to see the federal government unconstitutionally usurping powers that belong to the states. Our founders gave us Article 5 as a way to bypass the Congress to amend our Constitution because they knew there would probably come a time when the people would need to constrain the federal government. The 3 items in this resolution to be discussed at a national convention provide a framework for constraint. I worry about what the future holds for my children and grandchildren and how the dysfunction in Washington is going to affect them. It is my hope that members of this committee vote favorable on this joint resolution so it can be debated on the House floor and so future generations do not have to live through the demise of this republic and witness the failure of the American experiment in self-governance. The threats we face because of our runaway federal government apply equally to all, whether they lean left or to the right. This deserves debate and serious consideration. A convention of states to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution will provide we, the people, the ability to constrain the federal government. Please support passing HJ2 to the floor for debate so the full House has the opportunity to vote up or down on this joint resolution, and so the Maryland legislature might join other states to utilize the Article 5 tool our founders gave us to ensure the American experiment in self-governance is a success. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Next is Yuen Chang Smith.
Thank you. My name is Yuen Chang. I'm a first-generation immigrant from Hong Kong. I came to the United States 24 years ago, leaving everything I knew to escape from communism, where our central government controlled how many children we could have. There today, censorship has been extended not only to media, but also all internet activities are monitored and social credit score in place. I came to the United States to be free of those realities. Our government system is the best in the world when it operates in accordance to the Constitution. We have strayed from that. For years, our federal government has placed regulatory burdens upon businesses, rules upon rules to restrict commerce and freedom of speech. These are very familiar things to me, and my family does not want that to happen here. But we cannot stop that without your help. Federal agencies are not elected by the people. However, they are able to collect and spend people's money to play favoritism on projects that only benefit their donors. You know what's the best for Marylanders better than officials in DC. I hope I can count on you making sure that the federal government would not get bigger. I'm worried that if you do not, Americans would live like where I came from, overreaching central government controlled by a few hundred representatives, collecting huge amount of taxes from citizens, but distribute very little to provinces that need it most, and too much involvement in our personal lives. It will hurt everyone, particularly state governments, because they will no longer have control. Please keep this from happening. If you do not want to know how bad it feels to live under those conditions, neither do I want to go back. Therefore, I'm here to ask you to support HJ2. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next witness, Paul Macri.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Macri. I'm a retired Navy commander and an engineer. As the state's grassroots coordinator, I represent over 30,000 supporters in Maryland for Convention of States, and I'm a strong supporter for the resolution. The resolution before you proposes a convention to discuss 3 issues: fiscal restraints, federal term limits, and federal overreach. Let me explain how I believe the resolution will affect those 3 to save our constitutional republic we now call a democracy. First, without fiscal restraints, our children and grandchildren will be crushed by a multi-trillion-dollar debt due to excessive federal spending. You and I balance our family budget, as does the state of Maryland. We need to cut federal spending and return the spending decisions to the states. Second is term limits on Congress and federal officials. To be clear, we don't want term limits on you in Maryland. We like you and we need your voice. We want term limits on those in Washington, D.C., and that will make it easier for you to go to Washington, D.C. The third and final issue discussed at the convention is federal overreach. In the Navy, we call this mission creep. We need to return to the original limits on federal power and jurisdiction. The Constitution lists the few, the only federal responsibilities. Anything and everything else resides in the states, like 50 little laboratories. We have to end the one-size-fits-none approach. The few federal powers should be executed only in Washington, D.C. The many state powers will be applied locally. And as the saying goes, all politics are local. These three topics work together to bring the decision-making back home, along with the associated funds. When the power is returned, we'll be back in balance. I trust you to better execute power and budget the funds once those powers are returned to our state, certainly more effectively than those in Washington, D.C. These topics enjoy a supermajority in a nonpartisan way. We need your help to save our constitutional republic by voting favorably on this resolution so it can go to the floor for debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next is Bob Bagheri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hello, my name is Bob Bagheri. I live in Montgomery County, and I'm a Convention of States District Captain representing nearly 700 of your constituents. I came to the United States in 1979 from Iran and moved to Maryland in '81. I went to school, started a family, and now have 3 adult children who are about to start their independent lives. Over time, my priorities in life changed, and I began paying closer attention to politics. Confused by both political parties, I couldn't donate my hard-earned money or time to politics. It was about 10 years ago when I heard about Article 5 of the Constitution and the Convention of States. I knew that as Congress continued to frustrate more citizens like myself, eventually COS would gain momentum. You may think I'm here today to add to the list of complaints by your constituents. However, it is the opposite. My goal is to educate as many Americans about Article 5 and the Constitution, regardless of their political views. I'm here to ask you to join us and learn about Article 5 and realize its potential to help you bring power back from the federal government to the state government. There are so many things that I could list as my wish list for fixing our federal government. However, I believe one change will have a huge impact on every branch of government, and in a short period, it'll put our country back on the right track. This is one of the items addressed in the resolution, and that one that more than 80% of Americans agree on. That one change is term limits. Term limits prohibits politics from becoming a career and return it to being a civic duty. In conclusion, I simply ask you to please do not mistake our grassroots movement as a political movement. We are laser focused on one task and one task only, and that is to bring the power of the government back to the people as it was originally intended. Thank you for your time, and please vote in favor of HJ2.
Thank you very much. Robert Betts.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Betts, and I live in District 9A along with 800 other Marylanders who want you to call for an Article 5 convention. Those 800 voters and I have one message for you today. Please send HJ2 to the full House of Delegates for a fair discussion, debate, and vote. In my testimony today, I want to expose the fantasy behind the most common objections to this resolution. I have seen them presented before this committee in the past, and you are likely to hear them again. So I want you prepared to understand them when you see and hear them. First is the claim that a constitutional convention could destroy the entire U.S. government and should be avoided at all costs. That's true. And all of us supporting HJ2 today oppose a constitutional convention. However, HJ2 seeks an amendments convention, not a constitutional convention. The two are as different as Joe Biden and Donald Trump. A simple reading of Article 5 makes that clear. Second is the claim that there is no precedent for a convention of states. In fact, convention of states were common when our country was founded. They are simply any meeting between any number of states to talk about something and maybe make a decision or two. The most recent one was held in the 1990s to discuss water rights among several southwestern states. They didn't call it a convention of states, but that's what it was. And the amendments convention will be just the next one. Third is the claim that a convention of states would operate without rules, could not be controlled, and would allow corporate donors, lobbyists, and other undesirables to rewrite the Constitution and destroy our civil liberties. Again, a simple reading of Article 5 makes it clear that the only power this convention of states will have is to propose, not even adopt, amendments to the Constitution. I'll say just one more thing in closing. The objections I've heard that will likely be submitted to this committee are product of people who either haven't read Article 5, read it but can't understand simple English, or who understand what an Article 5 convention means and will say anything to retain the power they hold over us by changing nothing and preventing Marylanders from regaining any power of self-governance. Thank you.
Thank you. James McQueen. Oh, that you. James McQueen.
I'm sorry, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Welcome to the General
Okay.
Assembly, and you have 2 minutes to testify.
Thank you. And good afternoon, committee chairperson and delegates Holmes, Chang, Corman, Atterbury, Stein, and Barnes for listening to Marylanders. Sorry to see most of the delegates have left this hearing. I'm James McQueen.
I'm sorry,
See-
excuse me. That is not precisely true. There are numerous other committee meetings going on at the same time. And so the chairs of those committees had to leave, but most of the other members are still here. Go ahead.
Yep, I'm a COS chairman.
Start
Sorry,
again.
COS regional cap. My name's James McQueen. COS regional captain supporting over 3,800 Marylanders in Southern Maryland. How did we get here? The Bible has been around for thousands of years, yet it has not grown or changed. The Constitution of the United States, 28 pages, plus the study guide called the Federalist Papers. Today, the Constitution of the United States is 3,000 plus pages, and when you added all the Supreme Court rulings to it to amend, its sole function was defined to exercise of government and limit government powers. Today's government chaos only leads to burdens and limitations on the people. Soldiers, police, civil servants, and civil authorities do not pledge to a government, but to a U.S. Constitution, and only government under the U.S. Constitution. How can you pledge an oath and truly understand 3,000 pages? Today, American flag on the front porch says that we are a terrorist. The ruling class of elites are driving down our free society, but controlling the U.S. government through bureaucracy, Democrats and Republicans. Our Christian heritage has been rewritten. This was cited way back by Robert Brown Elliott, African-American congressman who stood up to Mr. Stevens on January 6, 1874. In the past, it's past time for Article 5 of the Constitution. Please vote in favor of HJ2 for a convention of states to be put the federal bureaucracy back in its right place and restore the states' rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth Lipko.
Here, you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right. My name is Seth Lipko. I live in District 32, and I represent just over 4,000 supporters across Anne Arundel County. I'm testifying in support of this application for a convention of states to propose new constitutional amendments. And the reason for my support is simple. I want my children to be able to look back at my life and be able to say with confidence that I did all that I could to ensure they inherited a better world than I did. And I apologize if you hear noise in the background, that's probably my kids. But that drive, shouldn't that be what we're all striving for? I mean, I'd wager that's the reason all of you are in public office today. It's the duty of each one of us, whether we personally have children or not, to move our society in a positive and forward direction. And I just want to thank all of you for serving your communities and attempting to bring about that positive change to all of our futures. But I see that our federal government's failing to do this. They're enslaving my children to debt from their frivolous spending. They're ignoring their constitutional responsibilities and taking on responsibilities that should be left to you, our state government. It might be a different story if they perform those duties well, but almost everywhere the federal government interjects itself, it just spreads itself thinner, it's less effective, and ends up leaving my daughters their bill. And they've done all of this without the approval of us, the American people. Honestly, you're our only hope to stop this trend. I'm not being represented well in DC, but I hope I'm being represented here. And that's why I ask that this committee takes this resolution to the floor for a vote and support its full passage. You can end the lifelong residencies in Congress, allowing new public servants to enter with new ideas to solve our nation's problems. You can put a stop to the overreach of power and restore balance back to our federalist system. And you can put a stop to the overspending and bring back some responsibility to our country. Thank you for listening. This really comes from my heart. I'm concerned about our nation's future, and this can solve many issues that we're seeing today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Elliot Wheatley.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. You got 2 minutes.
Okay. Hello, I'm Elliot Weekly. I'm in 7th grade and live in Hollywood, Maryland. This is my second time testifying before you all, and I am happy to be here, exercising my right to be heard as a citizen of the United States. Last year, I discussed learning about the role of federalism in our government and how important it is to have a division of power between branches as well as levels of government. I learned about the power of my voice and the need for citizens to be actively involved in working with legislators. I talked about how things have gone off track, but that our founding fathers wrote a Hail Mary buried in Article 5, allowing for states to reign in the federal government. This is the Convention of States. Now, I know discussing the founders isn't the most popular thing to do this day and age, but I would argue that every single person in this room lives the life they lived because of those 55 men, especially the 39 who signed our Constitution. Every citizen in this great nation, regardless of who they are, has a say in how things go. We are represented by you, represented in what should be your role as servant leaders. I was disappointed last year and confused about how you could hear about something like this and not try to understand it better. I was frustrated when this committee didn't even vote on the resolution. More than 30,000 of your constituents have very plainly asked for you to consider this. And as representatives, it is your duty to deliberate and then say whether or not you will pass this to the floor. My ask is simple this year. Please vote on the resolution in committee so we know whether or not you, as our elected officials, are interested in actually representing us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Will Zwart.
Yeah, it's Zwart. People have trouble with that one.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Please, you go ahead with your 2 minutes of testimony.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Will Zwart. I'm speaking in favor of this resolution, not only for myself, but for the 1,400 petition signers I represent as a district captain. I have to say, it's really great to be here again. I never thought that I'd get the chance to testify for anything, let alone for something as widespread as COS. I mean, this exact same resolution has been debated by every state in the country, except Connecticut. I guess they missed the memo. But everywhere else, thousands of citizens and legislators have testified for this resolution, just as I am now. And as someone of my generation, that's a pretty rare opportunity. Before I discovered Convention of States, I felt like a lot of young people do, where Washington, D.C. just seemed very indifferent. I think most Americans feel that way, but with younger people, it's especially strong because when Congress debates a bill, to them, it's just a bill, yay or nay. But to us, that's our future. We'll have to try and pay for that $30 trillion debt. I want to start a family someday, but I'll have to do so under hyperinflation and a crippled economy. Those kinds of decisions should be made by the people they affect, and my generation just feels like we have no voice, no control over our own future, which seems pretty bleak at that. That's why so many young people feel discouraged and hopeless, but that's also why this resolution is so great, because it shows my generation that we can actually be involved in the system and make an impact. Fiscal restraints allow us to build our wealth and lives. Term limits open up seats for us to actually be in the system, and overreach limits prevent the federal government from just voting away our futures. Every American should have control over their life, and in the same way that the Emancipation Proclamation gave thousands of slaves control of their lives, the Convention of States will give millions of Americans that same control today. This resolution will save my future. It is my future. Please support it and bring it through this committee to the floor for debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to circle back. I understand that David Hafer has joined the Zoom meeting.
Yes, I have. Do you hear me okay?
Yes, you will be the last witness, please.
And my apologies for the difficulties. Good afternoon. My name is Dave Hafer, and I am the District 29 captain for the Convention of States. I represent approximately 1,700 Convention of States supporters. For more than 35 years, I have served as a Marine and as a civilian in the federal government. I have a lot of experience in the Department of Defense, the Department of State, and the intelligence community. I have long been concerned over how the federal government spends the taxpayers' money. It always seems that when budgeting, we look to spend more so we can get more. As a manager, I would look for ways to spend the taxpayers' money wisely. My proposals to cut funds, programs, and positions typically fell on deaf ears. The usual refrain was, what if we need these in the future? spending more to get more. Every year we were given end of the year money, so we would be directed to take unnecessary overseas trips for unnecessary purposes to unnecessary locations. This is just one of the many examples of wasteful federal spending I witnessed during my long career. Over time, it became clear to me that the federal government will not restrain itself. And now the federal debt is over $31 trillion. The federal government has spent and grown far beyond what our founders had ever intended. They would be astounded and dismayed at the size and scope of the federal government today. However, in their incredible wisdom and foresight, they anticipated that this could happen. They left an escape clause. It is called Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, a convention of states. Please help us put an end to this excessive spending on the federal level. Americans don't want it and can't afford it. A convention of states will allow participants to discuss ways to address overspending and debt, which requires discussion by all states. Please support Resolution HJ2 so it can proceed to the House and Senate floor for debate, so Maryland will have a voice in this process. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes all the testimony on House Joint Resolution 2. Are there any questions for any of the witnesses from members of the committee? Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing on House Joint Resolution 2.